All right.
I think I have to go to a party in like an hour, so I might have to leave early if we go long.
All
Cool.
right. Yeah. So okay, let's get started. Glad to have you all here. So I hope at least some of you read the forum post I made about the layout iterations that have been done for the atomic swap UI in SYRIUS. That post kind of gives some background for this, for what we're going to be discussing in this call. So, um, but yeah, I guess I could start by sharing my screen and going through the um, layout.
As you're getting that teed up, I see Cryptofish just joined. I wanted to let you know before you joined. We all agreed that we were going to stream this live to YouTube. So just FYI, if that's a problem, let us know and we can stop that. Cool.
All right, so you should be able to see my Figma.
Yep.
All right. So yeah, so there were these two iterations that we made, um, and most of these ideas, or a lot of these ideas, were kind of built off of the feedback that we got in the last call that we had regarding um, these layouts in SYRIUS. And so yeah, that's kind of the background for these iterations. And so I guess I can just go through the use cases here that I've laid out. Uh, so here in this new iteration, we'd have these like actions that the user can select, and that would kind of um, that would allow us in SYRIUS to guide their experience better when they're doing the swap. So the first option here that we have is to initiate a native swap. And so if we look at what that would look like, so let's say that Alice is the one initiating the native swap, and she clicks on that button, and she would then be presented with this dialog to input the info for how much she's selling and who the counterparty is for the swap and the expiration time. And after she does that, she's shown this full screen modal that will, like this modal will kind of show the state of the swap and like what's happening with the swap. So first it's doing its thing and initiating the swap.
Test.
And after it's done that, it shows what she's selling and then what she's expected to do next. So she'll then be expected to send this deposit ID to Bob. Let's call the participant Bob in this example. So she would send the deposit ID to Bob via Telegram or Discord or whatever messaging service they're using. And after she does that, she's basically waiting for Bob to participate in the swap, and that's like what's shown here as well. And once Bob participates in the swap and he creates the counter deposit for the swap, then it will show up here, and Alice will see that okay, she'll receive 105 ZNN for this swap, and what they agreed upon beforehand, and she can then press swap to accept the swap and actually make the swap happen. And then once it does that, it's just, the swap is complete and she will receive the funds shortly. And then if we look at the same flow from Bob's perspective, so once Alice has sent Bob the deposit ID and Bob wants to participate in that swap, he would then press the participate in native swap option here, and he'd be presented with this pop-up where he would input the deposit ID and to get the swap details. And once he does that, he'll see this dialog or this modal where it shows how much he'll receive in this swap, and then he inputs the amount that he's selling. And at this point, SYRIUS is automatically calculating a safe expiration time for the swap so that there's no risk of Bob losing his funds because of that. So once Bob then participates in the swap, he'll be shown this modal, this full screen modal as well, where he can see the status of the swap and what he's selling and what he's expecting to get. And at this point, Bob can, well, he's going to have to wait for Alice to accept the swap, to make the swap happen. And SYRIUS is basically monitoring the network and looking to find the secret that Alice will publish once she accepts the swap, so that then Bob can unlock the deposit that's locked for him and basically complete the swap from his perspective. And once that happens, it shows this, and yeah, Bob will receive his funds shortly, and the swap is complete. So those were the basic flows for the native swap. I guess if there are any questions or comments related to those.
Yeah, I guess my main question would be, how does this work if, say, Alice just doesn't complete, like after Bob has set up his HTLC to Alice, what happens if Alice just doesn't publish the pre-image? Because I guess this is monitoring it, but it says keep SYRIUS open, but if the swap duration is like for a day, what happens if Alice just doesn't do it for hours or something? Is that something that Bob can recover from if he closes his laptop, or if he closes his wallet? I guess that would be my only concern.
All right, so I guess you're referring to this situation or this screen. So Alice doesn't publish she doesn't publish the pre-image. Is that what you're referring to?
Right. She doesn't publish the pre-image, or she waits a long time to publish the pre-image. I guess that would, yeah, I guess this is less about the UI and more just like, hey, like, are we gonna have ways to get back to this point even if you close your wallet out? Or
yeah, so this, yeah, I didn't mention that this modal screen can be closed. Like there's this button here that you can use that to close the modal, and you'll have access to that like swap modal from this list. So when you have like this active swap ongoing, you can close it and then do what you want. You can even close SYRIUS if you want, and then come back to it and press open, and it will open it back up. But at that point, like if it's been like many hours since you closed SYRIUS and now you open it back up, then at that point SYRIUS will have to scan through all the transactions in the HTLC contract to look for the pre-image and verify that it hasn't been published.
Yep, makes sense. I just want to make sure that we make note of that. Yeah, that it's likely that in some situations that the person may not just leave the screen open for hours, or they may not be able to.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also like how SYRIUS works. There's the auto locking screen. So I think, I don't know if it's like 15 minutes by default. So we might have to do this as some background process in SYRIUS so that as long as SYRIUS is running, like the application is running, it would be monitoring those transactions. But then in the case if Alice never publishes the pre-image and she never like accepts the swap or completes the swap, then there would somewhere, maybe here in this card here, or then somewhere in this modal, we would have then the functionality to reclaim the deposit. Bob could reclaim his deposit.
Gotcha. So there would be like a branching path, a card or two down, or yeah, I guess.
Remind me again, is there a limit on when they can do the reclaim? So after the HTLC expires, the transaction is terminated. They can reclaim that at any time, like moments after or a year after, right?
Yeah, the reclaim, there is no limit on when they can reclaim it.
Got it. Okay.
All right. So yeah, that was a native swap flow. And if there are no further questions regarding that, I guess we can look at the cross-chain flow. So again, if Alice wants to start a cross-chain swap, then she would press this here, initiate cross-chain swap, and then she would be presented with these options that she'd fill. She'd select the chain. Here, I think we could have Bitcoin as one, and then maybe some other possibilities. But basically, this is just to so the user doesn't have to know which hash type to use. Like for Bitcoin, it would be a different hash type than what you'd use for native swaps, for example. So this just kind of makes it easier for the user. Yeah, and then, well, these are the same things that she inputs in the native swap. Then when she initiates the swap, it will show this loading, and then once that's done, it shows this modal where it shows what she's selling and then kind of what's expected from her next. So in this case, she would have to send the deposit ID again to Bob so that he could participate in the swap. And after that, here's like, well, this would be, we were thinking of adding an animation here so that it would be kind of a, like this step first, and then we animate the next step, which would be to, so once Bob would deposit the funds on the other chain for Alice, then Alice could unlock that deposit with this secret that she used to create this deposit on NOM. So she would then copy the secret from here and then unlock the swap on the or the deposit on the other chain. And from her perspective, the swap would be complete at that point. Then if we look at Bob's perspective here, when he's participating in a swap, he'd click participate in cross-chain swap option, and he'd be presented with this pop-up where here he has to paste the deposit ID or the hash lock depending on which chain this cross-chain swap has been initiated on. So in this example, Alice initiated on NOM, and she gave the deposit ID to Bob, which Bob then pastes here. And if we look at this flow with the deposit ID, Bob would see this modal, and then he would use the hash lock here from this deposit to create the counter deposit on the other chain. So he would copy the hash lock from here and then make that deposit on the other chain for Alice. And again here, these would animate. So this is the first step, and then after that we would show the next step, which would give this input field where Bob could put the secret that he gets from the other chain. Once Alice unlocks that deposit on the other chain, he could use that secret then here and put it here to claim these funds that Alice locked for him on NOM. And yeah, once he does that, the swap would be complete from Bob's perspective. So yeah, there are quite a few steps with the cross-chain swap, and there's only so much that we can do right now to kind of guide and help the user do that. But yeah, would anyone have any questions or comments regarding that?
I guess it goes back to that question of, I know one of the kind of downsides or maybe drawbacks of implementing the guided interface is that we may want to make it more sophisticated than it even is right there. So for example, if SYRIUS did support, a Bitcoin wallet or something like that, then the cross-chain swap, at least for Bitcoin, could look very similar to the native swap.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of one of the considerations is how much do we want to pursue, say, this design here versus, the primitive version and investing into, additional wallet functionality for other chains. So yeah, that's I'm just saying what's already on the forum post.
Yeah.
So if we do the guided experience and then later, add a Bitcoin wallet to SYRIUS, is it pretty much a complete redo for the guided experience, or is there anything that you can reuse and leverage in the updated guided experience with native Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think if we add native Bitcoin functionality to SYRIUS, that wouldn't really affect this UX too much, because like George said, that it could be pretty much similar to what this native swap flow looks like. Because if we can connect the Bitcoin blockchain and read data from there, we can pretty much do all the same things that we're doing here with the native swap. So I don't think that would change it too much. But I think still, if we're gonna in general try to support cross-chain swaps to chains that, whatever chain that might support it, there should still be this cross-chain swap like functionality where you can make these swaps on any chain you want, as long as the other chain supports it.
I think this guided experience is a lot easier than the self-guided experience. And I think for right now, sorry, I'm a little sick. I probably sound different. I think for right now, if we did the self-guided option, it'd be easy to handle the workload of just answering questions and having explainer videos. But I think as things scale and we get a lot more users, it's going to be more difficult to handle those inquiries one by one. And we might wish that we had the guided experience. This is super clear. It looks very self-explanatory. And my biggest concern when I responded earlier on the forum was that you guys are going to spend a ton of time doing the guided experience and then have to just basically redo it for additional chains. But if you think that you can reuse the work on the future chains, I think this looks great and it looks very easy to use. I don't know how everyone else feels.
Yeah, I just want to say that I don't think, like I said, I don't think that adding additional chains would be the problem. I think it would be stuff like if we have like an off-chain communication protocol in SYRIUS, for example, or maybe the PTLCs. Those could also bring some new ways that could kind of fundamentally change how we think of these P2B swaps. But it's hard to predict the future. Like, it could be that we can, even in that situation, we could like improve, like basically use the same UI, but just improve it even more with those tools that we might have in the future.
How much more time do you think it would be to implement this?
Compared to the primitive experience?
Yeah.
Well, that's honestly, that's hard to say, because when I posted the message on the forum and I presented these designs, and there was like, I had the primitive experience, but I hadn't really like thought about that too much. It was more maybe an afterthought I had. And so I've spent some time now kind of trying to imagine how the primitive experience would work and look like, so that it tries to keep things super simple implementation wise, but still be like kind of usable to the user. And I think it's more complicated than I had initially envisioned it, like in my head. And once I started actually like trying to figure it out and looking through the flows, how they would work with this design, there's a lot to do here as well.
Has anything changed there that you want to show us from what we've seen in the past with the primitive?
Well, yeah, so this is like a primitive experience in that, like I think the idea behind, or I guess the motivation for this came from kind of what George was saying about like having only these primitive forms and like a very low level interface with the HTLC contract, so that we don't we don't do unnecessary work that we're going to have to kind of scrap when we get new new tech that we can use. So I guess like this UI is more low level than the initial design was. The initial design was somewhere kind of in between like a low level interface, and then it had some of this like abstraction that was attempting to help the user make the swaps. So this is basically the complete opposite of the guided experience, and this gives no guidance basically, and the user really kind of has to know what to do with this. So I mean, we can go through the like how a native swap would work with this UI, if you like.
So I guess if we don't think that we're gonna be, over abstracting at this point in time, and the primary use case we want to support. I mean, I don't know what other use case of HTLCs would not be supported. I don't know why. I don't know what use case of HTLCs that SYRIUS should support beyond atomic swaps. And atomic swaps are an interactive step-by-step experience. So I think ideally the guided experience is what we want to offer. In terms of, off-chain communication protocols, making things more compatible with PTLCs. The more I think about it, I'm not too worried about that. I'm PTLCs, because PTLCs I think they'll have a little bit of a different load too, because you can't use things like, hey, just you go ahead and create it and tell me the ID. There has to be a lot more communication up front, around key generation with multisig, things like that. So
Right.
at this point in time, I would not say I would say let's not think too much about PTLCs in creating the best user interface we can for HTLC atomic swaps, because even getting PTLCs on chain, there's still quite a bit of work that needs to be done to make them useful. But in the meantime, I don't think that should stop us from allowing users to trustlessly trade ZNN, QSR, or have liquidity with Bitcoin. So I mean, I was the one who brought up the concern, like, hey, maybe we'll have PTLCs, or we can share things in the future. But the more I'm diving into it, I don't know how much that's going to be the case.
Yeah, and I think one point there is that it could be in the future, but how far in the future would those be actually options for us? Like I think I wrote that in the forum as well, that like it could take some time for those things to be available, and like if we do the guided experience, that could serve users for quite some time as it is.
Yeah, especially given our liquidity situation right now, right?
Yep.
Yeah, having gone through these, the primitive experience with Sol, we did a couple I think we tried. Yeah, we did. We definitely did, and it was probably before you guys have made some improvements. But as I sort of consider myself like a power user, I've done the command line swaps, so I understand sort of how the workflow works. It was definitely confusing. I'm sure there's improvements, but it was without the guided experience seems to answer all the questions that I had when Saul and I were doing the primitive. What do I do next? What do I wait for? So I just think from a user standpoint, the guided experience will be far superior. Obviously.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, from a user standpoint, it would be a lot better. And this primitive experience is even more primitive than the initial version that you've tried. And so you'd be even more confused if you using this design.
Yeah, I think if the guided experience, I mean, could you imagine if we did the primitive and it was so complicated that people couldn't use it and they complained, and we ended up having to backtrack and do the guided experience? That would be frustrating.
Yeah, I guess one argument was that if the primitive experience would be so quick to implement, and it would be like we could get it like working quickly, and we could get it like users could use it, we could get it into production, then it might be worth it, and we could then just kind of then spend, or when we have more time, we could then make the guided experience. But I think after I've considered the primitive experience, the more I think there's, like I said, there's a lot to do there as well. And that would, if we then go for the guided experience after we've done the primitive experience, then that's we're going to have to throw the whole primitive experience, all that stuff we're going to have to throw away, because there's a lot that we can't, at least on the UI side, there's a lot that we can't reuse. So
I'm not sure if we would throw it away. I would personally prefer to have it in a separate tab and accessible to power users.
Right, yeah. So we'd have an HTLC tab and then a P2P swap tab, something like that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
So, if we're saying that the primitive experience is going to be for our power users, is providing that much more useful than just directing them to a CLI tool where the primitive experience is trivially implemented?
Yeah, I mean, I was asking myself that today when I was thinking about the primitive experience. Is this is barely better than just using a CLI. So, I mean, it helps the user. I mean, graphical interface is a graphical interface, but still, it's yeah. That might make sense to just tell the power users to use a CLI if they really need that flexibility. But I'm not sure exactly what use case you would use if you had the option to use the primitive version and then you had the option to use the guided version, what would be the actual use case for the primitive UI?
If there are use cases of HTLCs that aren't atomic swaps, I think there's a zero knowledge, you can pay for zero knowledge information or something like that, but it's
right.
that was kind of more like someone did an example of it, but it's not really, I don't think there's a lot of demand for that use case.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the people on the call. I think the people who would use the primitive experience or CLI are probably all on this call. There's like 6 or 7 people today. To George's point, just directing them to the command line would be the 6 people on this call right now. Just go for it, command line.
The people who would use the primitive likely have written their own client.
So Saul, what do you think? You're writing a lot of this code. What's your opinion?
Oh, I personally prefer the guided experience. It was just a matter of the amount of effort required to implement the like we were just weighing the pros and cons of how much effort will it require to implement guided, and now that I'm looking at what Vilchris has done here, he didn't have so many cards or widgets designed before yesterday. I thought that it would be a lot faster to implement the primitives. We would gather some user feedback. We'd have like some verbose tutorials written and in video format. And obviously we knew that users would have to use tutorials to work through these primitives. So that was something we factored into that decision. But it seems like everyone here is interested in having a guided experience. It is objectively better for everyone, and there isn't really much of an upside for primitives in SYRIUS, other than just the time to market. Really, our ability to deliver this is, we thought it would be a lot less, or we'd be able to do it faster. I'm not so sure anymore. I'm looking at all this. It's a lot of effort. So my vote is guided, but yeah, I don't know. I've been going back and forth. It's just it's a lot of effort for Vilchris and I to do either one.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's a lot of effort to get it right and to get it working so that it's solid. So yeah, it's not going to be done by end of March. Sure about that.
Yeah, I'm personally am. I don't want to call this calling Mr. Kane's bluff. For serious software, for like client level software, I'm less worried about deadlines. I think the deadlines are mainly driven by like, hey, let's consolidate on a single spork.
Yeah.
There is one critical SYRIUS change that we need to implement by the end of March. We need to disable the bridge. At the very least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's important.
That's a different conversation though.
Does anybody know what Alien is doing with the PRs?
Not really.
I haven't heard recently. It's been over a week since he's gotten. Since I haven't spoken to him in over a week. Last time he messaged me, he said he was splitting the PRs, and he'll join this forum, this particular call, when he's done that.
Okay.
And I don't know. He hasn't been on the forum in a few days. Anyways, I think it's a separate topic. We can definitely discuss it after this presentation if you want.
Well, if there's a vote, my vote is the guided experience. I don't know if anybody else listening, thumbs up or thumbs down maybe. If guided experience, thumbs up. Primitive, thumbs down.
Well, but before that, we all sort of agreed to the first UI that Vilchris designed. It looked good. and we thought it would be good, but in practice it was not. It didn't work out. So now we're redesigning it. Are there any questions about the UI here? Does anyone need the link so that they can inspect it further? Are we confident that this is like, do we have the right amount of confidence right now to make this vote, or like to pass a vote? Or is anyone feeling like
I think the main issue with the original design was that it tried to be two things, right? It tried to there was some primitive aspects of it, and there were some guided aspects of it. And I think the difficulty was trying to serve both use cases, whereas this is like the choices between, you know, one or the other. And so I think it's more of that decision first. Like I think, you know, I think that decision has to be made first, I guess, before like, hey, here are the exact detail. Because I mean, even here with the guided, right? There's I'd mentioned like what happens if Alice doesn't 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 submit the pre-image. There has to be some reclaim flow for Bob or for others, and I think that's still, I guess that probably, I don't know if that's in this diagram, so I wouldn't want to say that like this is the end, like this is the end all design. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, Chris. But I would say I think this is enough for us to get a sense of this is the direction of the guided, this is the direction of the primitive. Which direction do we want to go?
okay?
Yeah, I think that's well put.
Well, okay. Well, I figured that everyone really did want the guided experience in the end. It's just that, yeah, obviously, like there's the reclaim flow is not there, but we can answer some of those questions today. We have discussed this in private. I'm wondering if so what you're suggesting is we take a vote on whether we want primitives or guided, and then we reconvene at a later time to discuss the actual implementation. Because like right now, a lot of the details are here. They've been like this for about a week, and I don't think that we're about to change a lot. Like this might be ready to implement from Vilcris and my perspective.
Yeah, I was thinking of like what you said. It's all about how, like, well, you mainly wrote the first implementation, and it was tested, and like during that testing, I think most of the kind of the problems came apparent. So like one option that we could consider is that we just build the UI layer first, and we just mock everything. We don't actually, you know, do all the complicated, you know, stuff that needs to happen in the background, and we just make the UI layer and mock it, and then people can try it out and get a feel for how it would work. And that could be like, it wouldn't be, or the risk would be smaller, I guess, for us.
I don't know about you. I got the sense that you're really comfortable with Flutter, and I'm not totally there yet. So the UI, building the UI for me is it still takes a lot of effort, because it's I can get like the general sense, like the general UI implemented, but it's still like a lot of the forms just don't, like there's a lot of quirks with Flutter, I find.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm fairly comfortable with writing or implementing like designs in Flutter. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm also going to be like working on this with you. So, but we can discuss this like one-on-one. You know, how we want to do this.
So the other
Um,
thing, Saul, maybe we say is, we've all discussed it. We're gonna move forward with the guided experience, and then give everybody a day or two to really dig into it and say, we want any additional feedback within the next 48 hours. So then we can be reasonably comfortable that everyone has had their opportunity to provide feedback, and no one's gonna rug your guys' work.
Okay.
I already rugged it once. It won't be me.
I just want to be sure this time that there won't be any surprises at the end, and we have to redesign like any of these elements. So, how much time do you think that the community here needs to review the design? 48 hours seems pretty short to me. Is it a week, 3 days, 2 weeks?
I mean, I think that most of the people on this call will review it, probably. Maybe Mihaus and a couple of others. I have time today, so I'll go through it today in detail. But I don't think we need a week. I think a couple days, 2 days. I don't know how everyone else feels.
Yeah, I think you can only get so far by just trying to look at like a static images of how it is supposed to work. And there's a lot of stuff that are kind of like implied and maybe may not be obvious to someone who's like looking at the design. So like the obviously the feedback from that is valuable, but it might not be like able to answer to like all the questions that we're looking to get answered.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
I-
here's. Go ahead,
Go ahead,
George.
sir.
No, I agree.
Well, I was gonna say like there's sort of a compromise here. We don't have to implement all of this in Flutter. We can use Figma to design. I forget the exact term. Like, is it a wireframe or it's like you can sort of connect all of these visualizations together and uh, sort of have a flow. Like if you press a particular button, it'll display a different like the next modal window. Could we just do that? And then I think that the time to deliver that is a lot less than implementing all of this in Flutter.
Yeah, actually, that's a good idea. We could do that. Yeah. So we'd create like a prototype with Figma, and then anyone could use it and see how the flow would actually work. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I know some of the concern, and this is some discussions we've been having in the other channels, is like what is payable work, what's not payable work. And I don't want that to be like the worry for you guys, but it seems like we are kind of coming up right now with just some milestones of like, hey, like we have this design, we we have this design. Let's agree on this design or not. And that's like this is something valuable. And like even this design, if we agree on like, hey, this is something we want to move forward with, I think that's a valuable milestone that could be worry of a payout phase, right? Next thing could be the wireframe or something like that. I think that I if part of the look we want to make sure we get this completely right is okay, well, let's make sure that whatever work we can do is going to end up valuable, is going to be end up something that we can compensate it for. I think we can address that by breaking this down into milestones and things like that, right? I mean, if we say we all like this design and we like this general direction of design, I think that's something we can pay out for, and and we'll try to break it up and make it more iterative for you guys. You're not worried about, well, what happens if we get here and we have to throw it away and start all over.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so I think I've got a better understanding of what we want here. We were going to hold a vote of do we want to go in the primitive direction or in the guided direction. Now that my concern has been addressed, I'm okay with holding that vote, or is it just implied we're going with guided? We had tons of
One-
thumbs up there.
I just
No one has said they really want the primitive.
yeah.
My main thing was just as you mentioned, like if it's a quick thing to do and we're worried about time, like for delivering that first. But if we're thinking about advantage over CLI, it's not actually that easy to implement. I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, I think the arguments, like, there aren't really that many arguments left for the primitive experience, like after this chat that we've had.
Yep. I agree. If
It's
anybody
kind of funny.
go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, it's kind of funny how, like, all week we've all been saying, "Oh, let's do primitives, and then after like a 30-minute conversation in voice chat, we all change our minds. And
Well, I for me, what changed it is the primitive experience looks as complicated almost as the guided experience, and it also sounds like we can reuse a lot of the work as we expand to other chains. So that's really why I've changed my mind.
yeah, for sure. Like guided was always the end goal. It was just a matter of weighing how much effort it was going to take to implement it, and whether we wanted to deliver that now or at a later time. But it seems like we just want to focus on that, and that's great. That's
So
really the user experience we're going for.
I am not intimate with how much effort it is to make these forms, so I have to trust you guys on, is the trade-off worth it?
It's effort for me. It might not be for Phil Chris.
So
I'm still
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I kind of missed what George said, but
So I know we're approaching George's cutoff here in 6 minutes. Really quickly, if you guys don't mind, just switching gears a little bit, how would you guys feel about having a call like this with some of the other devs? You know, like Alien Coder, and then maybe Samamu or Shamu for the bridge to talk about his work, ask questions, and just get a general sense of where he's going with that. Would you guys appreciate a call with each one? Maybe one to talk about the bridge, and then another one to coordinate with Alien. I think that's worthwhile.
I would love that. I haven't offered or invited Sumamu to a conversation. I have invited Alien Coder. He said he would join at a later time, but we can definitely ask him again.
George and Vilkris, would that be worthwhile?
well, yeah. I mean, at least with Alien, I'd probably have things that I could, discuss with him. But regarding the bridge, I'm not sure if I have that much, really, like, how much input I can give on that specific topic. But I'd definitely join if such a call was had.
George?
For the bridge, I think there's there's a lot of, I'd want to prepare quite a bit before such a call.
How do you plan to prepare? Would you just read through all the code and then try to understand their implementation?
No, I mean, like I said, I think one of the key issues has been that there has been no problem statement. There's the solution hasn't really been defined. It's all through a reference implementation, and so I think that we can ask like, okay, well, you walk us through this, right? That's maybe something we can do, but I don't necessarily like that can clarify things, but I don't necessarily think that gets us closer to bridge code that we would want to accept.
I'd like them to be a little bit more descriptive with what their solution is, and if that requires a call, then so be it. I've been asking for documentation so that I can start reviewing their implementation. But yeah, I feel like there's still some unknowns for us. It's sort of difficult to get the information from them.
Yeah, but basically, the way I expect that call to go is not like this call where it's like, okay, just walk us through, and yeah, looks good, looks good, looks good. That's
Right.
really that's
Yeah.
Right.
I also don't know what their expectations are. Like, are they just dropping thousands of lines of code and expecting it to be approved, or like there hasn't really been any sort of community feedback process, and I'm not sure if they're expecting to just skip that.
My guess is he was there thinking that they're going to submit the code. Kane is going to review it, and that's going to be sufficient for the pillars to adopt it. That's just reading the tea leaves. And I think, many of us have communicated to him that we don't think that's going to fly. So, maybe he's working on completing the documentation so he can share it with us. You guys can read it more carefully and be prepared to ask more detailed questions. Maybe that's what's happening. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. So yeah, maybe a call with them would be good.
I think many of the lessons learned with regard to the first iteration of this interface are going to repeat themselves on a much larger scale
Right.
with this bridge code.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Very large, very consequential design decisions have been made without feedback. So
Agreed.
All right. Well, does anybody have anything else you guys want to chat about? I know, George, you're out of time.
yeah, I mean, great work, Phil Chris. I mean, it's all great work as well. I mean, this is. I know that there are I think so you brought up the Decred website, but I mean I don't really I think Phil Chris said as well, like I don't think there's much like reference material for this kind of really user-friendly guided experience, mainly because I mean how many people are actually incentivized to create a really user-centric, trustless experience for this? Maybe a lot of people just want to, shuffle people onto their own app or, a different Dex or something else. So I mean, great work.
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna end the stream right now.
Yeah, I do have to bounce. So I may we'll stay on for another minute or two, but yeah, I gotta bounce.
Cool.